Welcome to Real Herbalism Radio Show. Today's show is brought to you by Hunter Creation, graphic design and website designers putting your marketing ideas to life through bumper stickers, websites, business cards, you name it, they can help you out. Visit them at huntercreation.com. And Sierra Lupe Consulting.
Sierra Lupe Herbal Consulting offers in-home or distance consultations, custom formulations, and holistic care in conjunction with your existing diagnosis or medication. You can get a hold of me, Sue Sierra Lupe, at thepracticalherbalist.com.
All right, Candace Hunter with Get Healthy Now with Candace.
Are you working with a pre-diagnosis, like pre-diabetes or pre-something else? Are you concerned about your health over the long run? Would you like to maybe start to use some more natural treatments for dealing with some of the diagnoses or the chronic conditions that you've been dealing with? If you would, check out Get Healthy Now with Candace. She can consult both near and far, and she'd love to help you get healthy.
All right. And Ace High Heat Graphics, custom and printed shirts and hats. A great way for your group or nonprofit or church group, whatever you have, to raise funds for your activities. As low as $5.25 a shirt. Give them a call at acehighheatgraphics.com. Occupy Medical.
Occupy Medical is a free street reach herbal clinic. We have doctors and nurses and herbalists and mental health providers all working together for the better of the community, proving that healthcare really is a human right. Contact us at occupy-medical.org.
All right, and the Herbal Nerd Society.
Herbal Nerd Society is an exclusive membership which operates not only to educate the members about some of the pretty involved and advanced information about the herb of the month that we choose, but it is also a great way to support the Practical Herbalist website and the Real Herbalism Radio podcast.
So if you'd like to get cool videos or cool audio,
Let's Talk series,
or if you'd like to get a hold of all the podcasts that are available for Real Herbalism Radio, which is 140 some odd. It's a lot of them.
A lot.
Definitely a lot. So if you want to get a hold of those and you want some exclusive articles, you want to maybe dive a little deeper into your herbal practice or your herbal learning, check out the Herbal Nerd Society. Join us now.
Yeah, thank you.
And with that, on with the show. When we awake to our true selves, or are ready to do so, the plants will call loud and clear. If you ignore the call, they'll just call louder and louder until you have no choice but to listen. Today we're talking with Nick Polizzi, author of Sacred Science, documentary filmmaker, and explorer of ancient medicine while following the call of the plant world into sacred healing. And now here are your hosts, Candace Hunter and Sue Sierra Lupe.
I'm Candace Hunter.
And I'm Sue Sierra Lupe. And welcome to Real Herbalism Radio. Welcome to the show, Nick.
Hey guys, thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's a real pleasure to have you here. Wow, and you're talking to us from Boulder, Colorado.
Yeah, what's the weather like over there?
Oh man, it's so nice here. So we've had about 3 or 4 days of rain, which is, I guess that's pretty normal for this time of year, but 3 days or 4 days of rain followed by like a day and a half of sunshine. So everything is just full blown bloom all around me.
So you've got the pollen big time too.
You know, we do. Some people have a sensitivity to pollen. I used to. I don't anymore. But yeah, pollen's a big deal around here.
Okay, so as an herbalist, we have to ask you, why don't you have sensitivity to pollen anymore? What did you do to fix that?
Oh,
oh man, this is like
no pressure. No pressure.
I mean,
yeah.
This just kind of leads into everything. Everything is everything. So the pollen's going to lead into the Pandora's box ultimately.
Right.
So I mean,
well, that's your book.
I'm popping that right open there.
Your book was a big Pandora's box. Goodness sakes.
I mean, thank you. I hope it was a big. I mean,
it's supposed to be.
But you never know when you wite these things what they're going to be and how they're going to be taken. So I aim to sort of have that kind of that same play that same role as I guess the question about pollen did, which is like, what happened that changed everything for you?
Yes.
So for me, I think it probably was a combination of diet. I was very before I kind of found this path, this shamanic native healing path, I wasn't very aware of what I was putting in my mouth. And I ate a lot of things I probably shouldn't have been eating. And I think that my diet probably exacerbated my sensitivities to pollen. That would be my guess.
Yeah, probably. I'm guessing. I'm picturing the like, fast foods and the crinkly package aisle.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, it was like a lot of. I used to eat a lot of dairy, and I used to eat a lot of gluten. And I know there are people out there who swear by dairy and also by gluten-rich foods, and I'm not slamming anybody for their diet. But for me, it was like those two things are
Yeah.
kryptonite. And like for a while, I thought maybe it was just a coincidence that when I stopped eating those two things, my health got better. But then when I slowly, I'd revert and go, and as soon as I add them back into my diet and try to, it just completely destroys me. So,
Yeah.
we're all kind of living petri dishes, and all we can really do is experiment on ourselves. And for me, that has been the understanding that I've come to, is that those two things, cheese, and dairy in general, and gluten-rich foods are not good for me.
Yeah.
Well, for our listeners that may not have had the chance yet to either read your book or look at your website or see the video, could you give them a quick and dirty, just as an introduction, so they understand what happened here? Why are we even having this conversation?
So about 9 or 10 years ago, I did something that was very ill-advised, that even looking back on it in retrospect, I don't know if I would ever have done it again. I took 8 people from around the world who were really sick down to the middle of the Amazon rainforest on the border of Brazil and Peru, and we spent 35 days working with shamans and the indigenous medicines that exist down in that region of the world. And on top of that, and perhaps the most important, the 65,000 plus species of plants that live down there that are very, very understudied by modern medicine played a big role in what we experienced. So I brought a bunch of patients that were really sick down to the jungle, and we filmed the whole thing. And it turned into kind of this culty kind of a documentary once we released it online for free. And now it's just turned into this thing. It gets viewed thousands and thousands of times every day. It's turned into this huge community. And from there, we've started, really trying to dive deeper with the folks that watch it. So that turned into the Sacred Science community. And that's how you find me here. I wrote a book about it that just came out about a month ago, about our journeys down there, the shamanic secrets, the personal breakthroughs, the thin veil that separates us from the unseen world that seems to play a very big role in a lot of what we're experiencing here on planet Earth. Those things are all kind of covered in that book. That is hopefully a Pandora's box.
Yeah.
It was. One of the things that I found really fascinating in your discussion within the book was that you talk about how you and the entire filming crew started off with this sort of distance, as if you were separate from the experience, the people who were doing the healing or were there to be healed, all of that. And by the end, you were not separate. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how that shift really impacted all of you. How did that happen?
Well, so as a documentary filmmaker, I've made 3 documentaries. We've got 2 more coming out this year. I mean, as a documentary filmmaker, one of the cardinal rules is you don't get involved in the subject matter. You don't allow your own personality, your own take on the situation, your own fears or hopes affect the topic, affect the material that you're filming.
Right. It reminds me a lot of the way modern doctors are taught to approach patient care.
That's so good. Was that like a side slam? Was that like a little dagger there? I mean,
No.
I mean, it really does. It reminds me of that. That's why I'm like, your journey to me seems very much like it parallels many things that are showing up with modern doctors.
And I work with doctors.
Yeah.
And I was just at a college teaching that, one of the things that they are teaching people is you're going to be seeing people every 15 minutes, every 20 minutes. And people were saying, you want to survive that experience, you're going to have to pull yourself away or you will be shattered. You're not going to make it through the day. And of course, I have a little bit different take on that. my take is that if it means something to you, it's going to break your heart every day anyway.
Mm.
So it sounded kind of like that's similar to what happened to you.
You guys are schooling me. We're only, what, like 5 or 10 minutes into this call, and you guys are schooling me right now. Oh my gosh, I've never looked at it that way. I never saw it that way. Oh, that is so spot on. Like, that was the way we approached this.
Yeah.
We didn't realize we were. I mean, it had always worked out great. And the 2 films prior was like, hey, I'm setting up this experiment. All of our films involve, Nick Polizzi films, if you want to call them that, involve real patients going through something. All I've ever filmed were people who are desperately ill trying to heal themselves using alternative methods. And I think that was sort of an unspoken part of what we were doing, agreement that we had with one another, was that we don't affect the experiment. We have to be here. We have to put it together. We have to bring the right healers in. We have to bring the right patients in, and we just have to step back and we have to do our jobs, and part of our jobs is, it's not like we're detached or we're cold, to the patients,
Right.
ever. I select my film crews based on their bedside manner. Like
Nice.
not in that they're going to walk up to the person and start soothing them or pacifying them, but somebody who can hold space.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I think that, holding space is kind of like this new buzz term in like the shamanistic kind of yoga communities, of like, how can you actually be there and see something and not have to break the silence, or not have to interject yourself in some kind of I don't want to say awkward, but interject yourself, period, and what's transpiring before you. Can you sit there and hold space for someone else to have their process? And that's how I select my film crew. So it isn't that we're detached. And so I guess in a way, when I think about a doctor being detached, I don't look at it at the doctor in the way that we're talking about a doctor as holding good space for patients at all times. If you see how many patients does a doctor see on a given day? Is it 20 patients? It's hard.
If you're an ER doc, it's going to be a heck of a lot more.
Yeah.
But in a regular hospital, you've got 15 minutes per patient, and they give you that's 3 per hour, because they give you 15 minutes to write the notes about all of those patients you have seen per hour.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how can you hold? I mean, how could you even be expected to hold space? I mean, that's just too much.
You can't even get a good blood pressure especially if you're working with geriatric patients.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I guess to answer your question, we went down there knowing full well that big part of our job was to hold real space, real sacred space for people.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, this was my belief going down there, was I need my film crew, I need everyone on my team to be able to wake up at 6 a.m. before the sun comes up and be ready to go, and be in in the various locations that are miles in the middle of the jungle. The jungle is not an easy place to be, period, let alone be there hauling gear and having to go from place to place, covering these 8 patients who are, by the way, living in remote dieta huts that are not anywhere even close to each other. So getting out to them and doing it in a way that is considerate of the process that the patient's going through. That's ridiculous hard work.
Yeah.
So I guess and then the night ends at 8 when the sun goes down, and then after the sun goes down, there might even still be some things. So they're working crazy hours. So for me, when we were going down there, my thought process was, listen, you're going to see a lot of things. They're going to be incredible things. They're going to be disturbing things. You have to have your own process, but you can't. But we're not going to be on the same journey that these patients are on, because we're down there working. We have to get this footage. That's our job. We've created this experiment. We have to be up at 6 a.m. We have to be done by 8 at night. And if we're going to go through a process and curl up into the fetal position for 2 days, then this film's not going to get made.
Yeah, right.
So that was the thought, and it's kind of a conundrum, right? Because you're in the middle of this incredible, really, really remote place where this work is being done, and you're tempted to get sucked into it, but you're sort of resisting on a level, because you want to make sure that at the end of the day that you get it all in the can.
You also don't want to create more patients for the healers to have to heal.
So true.
Right.
So true. Yeah. No, that was the thought process, but as we
the reality.
Dun, dun, dun.
And I guess this is maybe one of the takeaways, is that the jungle itself is medicine.
Yes.
the forest itself is medicine. And although I knew that, I guess, I mean, I had gone on crazy treks and vision quests up here in the States beforehand. I still didn't quite understand the power of the jungle. I would say the jungle might even be more potent than any other place in terms of like natural environment on the planet. You go there, it's very hard to keep your bearings in the jungle if you're there for over 2 weeks. There's just an energy to the place. And this is something that in the book I talk about. You know, one of the first trips into the Amazon I ever took, you know, the tuk-tuk driver that was driving me basically said, listen, ayahuasca, yeah, that's strong, but this jungle, don't ever underestimate her. She's the strongest medicine there is.
Yes.
So we thought that, and I thought that was a really charming, and I bump into this all the time, and I'm a moron in a lot of ways. I bump into these things all the time, and I think that they're like these really quaint mythological kind of fairy tales that these indigenous cultures have. And oh, isn't that so quaint, you know?
Yeah.
The reality is, most of this stuff is said, and it's said with sincerity to people like me.
And it's an understatement. It's an understatement of the reality.
Total understatement. So we all started losing our minds, essentially. If you want to put it that, we all started losing our minds about halfway through, because the jungle itself was getting into our brain and getting into our pores and starting to play with us. And you know, again, we could go into that for hours. It's all in the book. It's I'm not one of these guys. I lived in Berkeley, over the last 5 years. I wasn't born there. I was born in the middle of a middle class, working class area of Connecticut. I wasn't, I was born Christian. I went to regular elementary school. I didn't go to a Waldorf school. Like this is not the way my brain was trained to think. So,
right. Yeah. So how do you get from there to here? I mean...
Well, you guys know, because I'm sure probably in some ways we all have the same kind of entryway into this work. It's the same thing. It's a wounded healer. Like I was on a trajectory to be a real estate investor for the rest of my life when I was in my early 20s, and I was very happy to be that. I mean, I was loving it. I was loving buying and selling real estate. That's what I did. But then somehow out of the middle of nowhere, I started getting ocular migraine headaches. And I don't know how it doesn't run in my family. I don't know where they came from, but so anyone listening right now who doesn't know what an ocular migraine headache is, it's not a normal headache. It feels like a bone is broken in the middle of your brain and it's being pushed on by somebody. And it's a miserable pain. You're hypersensitive to everything in your environment. A lot of times you lose your vision during them, and it's just absolute agony. So it's not the kind of thing that you can just kind of pop an Excedrin and go to work and just kind of deal with, and while you're just kind of push off to the side. Like I literally stopped my life in its tracks.
Yeah, yeah.
And it was because of the frequency. I was getting them 2 times a week. So, 2 days out of the week, I was just completely laid up. And so the first thing that
burn through your vacation time and sick time real fast.
Right. And as a real estate investor, you're out on the road. You have to drive around. You have to look at properties. You have to talk to people.
Right.
Like I wasn't.
And when it starts, you can't drive.
No.
It wasn't happening. And so I come from a family of nurses. So a lot of my on my mom's side, there's 4 nurses, 4 aunts that are nurses that live in Connecticut where I grew up. And so they had access to the premier neurologist in Connecticut. So I first went to see him, and he looked at me and he did an MRI and all this kinds of stuff. And he said, you're gonna have to go on this. And so basically, it was more of like a circumstantial, take it when it happens kind of medicine. So I was on Fioricet, was the first drug I was on. That worked for maybe 1 or 2 migraines. It kind of numbed it out a little bit. Didn't work great, but it at least kind of curbed the pain. Then it ultimately stopped working about a month later. And then I went back. He gave me a stronger version of that. I'm not sure what the drug was called. Can't remember. That worked for maybe like 2 or 3 weeks. Then it stopped working. And then, he basically said, if this isn't working, we need to put you on a preventative medicine that's going to potentially work, but will definitely change your perception of what you're seeing. It'll change your moods. And somehow, even though I was kind of like this typical kind of, white American male in his early 20s living in New York City, that was just where I drew the line. I somehow managed. I was like, no, I'm not going to do that, because I had seen what that did to other people in my family who were on other kinds of antidepressants and things like that. Like, I'm not doing that. So I stopped modern medicine right there, and that was where I started trying to find alternatives. I just want to say something about how bad these headaches were. I remember there were so my girlfriend at the time, she would come home sometimes when I was having these headaches, and it was, my brain was so scrambled, there was so much pain, and there was so much disorientation during them, that I would try to talk to her, and I would say something and the wrong words would come out. Like it would be like, you'd
Word
say, "Hey,
salad.
can I get you a glass of water?" And I would want to say, "Yes, please." And instead I would say, "Baseball, dog, hamburger." Literally, it was weird, weird words come out that made no sense. And so anyway, that was where my journey began. I was desperate. I knew that modern medicine wasn't going to work for me. It was the first time I ever realized that what I had been taught, the paradigm that I had grown up in, did not have all the answers. So that was where I started on the natural healing path, and that ultimately led me to shamanism.
Wow.
Yeah, it sounds like, I mean, it really sounds to me like those ocular migraines were, the universe giving you a big wake up call saying, okay, you've had enough of this playtime. Now it's time to do the real work. Now it's time to wake up and get moving here.
I mean, and they never came back. So I figured out what they were being caused by. I started doing energy healing stuff, and that really tapped me into, that was the first, my gateway into all of this was energy healing, learning how to use different Chinese acupuncture techniques, and different types of hands-on healing therapies, and realizing that, oh my gosh, there's energies going on inside my body. There are things that I'm experiencing that I've been writing off.
Right.
And that I've been, and I think this is a big deal with herbalism too. I mean, honestly, all these modalities, the sensitivity to subtle energy, to those sensations that are going on in our periphery that we don't give any credence to because we were never taught to.
Yeah.
That was what energy healing taught me. It was like, oh wow, that actually, that sensation or that image that just flashed in my mind, or this taste that just came over me, like this actually this is information that is not just kind of like some random static that I should ignore. And so that somehow tuned me into my diet. And what I realized was causing my migraines after I tuned into my diet and started testing out the energy of food, was I realized that the one herb that I was on, that I've been on for a very long time, and that everyone seems to be on in this country without realizing that it's actually a powerful herb, was causing my migraines, which is coffee.
Yeah.
I started realizing that me drinking a pot of coffee every day was not only making me stressed out, but once I eliminated it, because I started just eliminating any food that seemed like it might not belong in a normal diet. And so ultimately I was like, oh, there's actually this one thing I keep on drinking because I'm addicted to it, that I just don't want to stop because I just don't want to. And and everyone drinks it, so it can't be harmful. I guess I'll just cut it out for like a week. It was, first of all, it was miserable trying to cut it out. But then once I cut it out, my migraines stopped. I mean, I literally went from having migraines 2 times a week to having no migraines ever again.
Isn't that funny how that really powerful herb, not only does it cause migraines, but it can stop migraines?
Right.
Like it's really a key, a lock and key there. That's a heck of, it's a heck of a herb.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I find it interesting too that it ultimately called you into its homeland. I mean,
ooh, Candace. Whoa. This is just life with Candace. So, buckle in.
I know. Come on, you guys.
I think I find that fascinating and incredibly powerful. And it takes so much courage to follow that calling. And you did that. I mean, wow.
Now, a word from Thomas Easley about the Journal of Functional Herbalism.
The Journal of Functional Herbalism is a free online journal promoting the integration of traditional Western herbalism, clinical nutrition, and functional medicine. It's published by the Eclectic School of Herbal Medicine, and you can find the Journal of Functional Herbalism at functionalherbalism.com.
Well, you know what? If I had thought that it was the coffee bean calling me down to the Amazon, I would have been probably even more scared than I was, because of all the pain that I have associated with it at this point.
Yeah.
But that's an amazing connection. I had never even thought that.
It's not native there, of course, but it is. I mean, Brazil and the area that you are in, that same zone that you're in, they've got a lot of coffee plants out there. I'm sure you probably saw many coffee plantations whilst in the air.
Tons of coffee.
Yeah. Well, it's I don't know. I found that the plants they call, and when it's shamanic, they let you know, they intrigue you, they allure you, with allure, they bring you down into it, but they won't scare you too much. They want to scare you a little bit, but not too much. They don't want you to turn away, but they want you to realize this isn't little. This is big.
Yeah.
I'd like to be called to a plant that grows in the Bahamas.
Yeah, there you
That
go.
would be my
The Caribbean herb.
yes. That would be great.
So
Something involves a lawn chair.
One of the
That's so
things that you
good.
talk about late in your book is that everything is medicine. And that was something that I think resonates with many herbalists, in part because we look at diet and lifestyle. I mean, there are times where someone comes in, I'm doing a consult with them, they walk away and there's not a single plant listed as a tea or a tincture they should take. It's let's adjust your diet, let's get you sleeping right, and then we'll talk. Then we'll look at the plants later, but first diet and lifestyle, because everything is medicine. One of the places that modern herbalists, at least in our American culture, don't entirely embrace is the idea that everything is medicine. And that's something that you touch on in your book. And I'm wondering how does that resonate with you now after all, after everything you've been through?
Well, it's interesting when my wife Michelle became pregnant, when we became pregnant, with my son River, who's 5.5 now. I remember being down in the jungle. Maybe she was 3 or 4 months pregnant. I was down in the jungle filming, and I was talking with Roman, who's one of the shamans featured in the book. And I told him that Michelle was pregnant. He looked at me and gave me this big kind of mischievous smile that he always gives me before something painful is about to happen to me. and and he said, "Brother, if you think grandmother is strong medicine," grandmother is another term for ayahuasca for anyone listening who's not familiar with that terminology. If you think ayahuasca is strong medicine, there is no stronger medicine on this planet than raising a child. He's like, so buckle up. And I remember being like, yeah, that's really nice. That's really nice to kind of say. But honestly, the scariest medicine for me, one of the scariest medicines for me still is ayahuasca. Like, there's medicines that are my allies that I can work with, and it's usually very grounded, joyous experience. Grandmother ayahuasca. When the ceremony is right, it is by far the hardest thing for me personally to work with, which is why I know it's my medicine. But so anyway, I'm like, yeah, no, nothing's harder than grandma. But then, of course, my son is born, and from the very beginning, it was medicine. And I'll share one little example. So we were the kind of couple, Michelle and I, that were all about the home birth, right? And I'm sure a lot of people tuning in can relate to that. We were like, we're doing this at home. We're doing it in a tub. We're going to have candles. We're going to have just only the right people around. It's going to be just this thing. And honestly, during some of our classes, because, you go to the CPR class because you want to be a responsible parent. So we went to the CPR class the hospital offers. And we see other parents who are talking about, their planned C-sections. We're kind of looking at each other with this, like, oh my gosh, who would ever do that? That's crazy. Right. I can't believe that we live in this crazy world. Who would ever plan a C-section? Don't they realize the beauty of birth and how it just has to be done in this way for so many reasons? And of course, what does
I see this coming. Yeah.
It's an emergency C-section.
Yep.
And so all the things involved with River, my first son, from the very beginning have been medicinal. And by medicinal, I don't just mean challenging. He's an amazingly brilliant human being, and he's challenged me just as much with the beauty as much as he has with the hard stuff. But just that little dose of like, oh, you think that this is how it is? No, this is not how it is. Let's just shake that loose right now. Let's shake it all.
You don't get humble pie. You get the entire humble banquet.
Well,
but it's that way. So children are medicine. And I think that we make a mistake. And I think a lot of what I'm doing in the book, and I try to do in the book, is obviously we have this crazy, exotic, awesome roller coaster of an adventure down to the jungle. And there's all kinds of stuff that happens, good, bad, and ugly. But I think that the underlying concept that I'm trying to bring home is that the work needs to be done exactly where you are right now. And the work and the medicine are the exact same thing. It's just a matter of looking at your life with the right lens. And the mistake that I think a lot of us make, especially those of us who are in the whole foods, granola, shamanic yoga, raw food, vegan, paleo culture, who think we know, something about this world. I think the mistake that we make is that we think the work needs to be done in some retreat place, some retreat center or some yoga center, or even wait till the yoga class, wait till I get to Bikram today to kind of work that out. The work should be done right now. It shouldn't be delayed. There's no like, okay, well, I have my one release valve of an hour every day, or I have my one release valve of the year where I go away for 2 weeks and I can work through all my stuff. That's the biggest illusion that there is. And I can say that I can't say a lot of things with regard to the shamanic realms with much certainty, because as we all know, as we get far into this work, we realize that certainty is certainty is an illusion. But the work and the medicine and everything is something that I can say with relative certainty, that every moment of your life can be looked at as either taking a pass or possibly a medicine, something that you can actually work with and use to evolve, or it can be looked at as poison. I mean, if you look at a relationship that's bothering you and you want to just kind of let it fester and own you, it will. Right. But if you turn toward it and you head your ship into the storm, which is what I think a lot of people on the shamanic path do, which is why I'm so honored to be on this path, is that the seekers that are in our community, people that I've had the pleasure of meeting, are people who have turned their ships and continue to turn their ships into the choppy water, and they just go right into it, and they're willing to do it, and they're willing to test. They're willing to test the unknown and take that step forward. So yes, I believe that everything is medicine.
Wow. Well, that's one heck of a perspective you've got there.
It's powerful, especially when you start looking. I mean, we are working as healers to help people heal illnesses. Mm-hmm. And in Western culture, those are considered ill, bad, evil. And like with your ocular migraines, that was big medicine. And yes, it sucked going through it, but it opened you up to a whole new world as you healed it.
Yeah.
So the illnesses and, things like the allergies, they're opportunities for healing at much bigger levels, I think.
I love that idea, opportunity. I mean, if you think about the shamanic lineages in Siberia and Mongolia, just another example, so here autism is looked at as this thing. I know this is a very sensitive topic, and I have some friends that have this in their lives, and I don't want to sort of downplay this, but autism here in the States is looked at in one way. It's looked at as a disability, or even like a hindrance that needs to be worked through. Whereas when you go into these other cultures, and this isn't just in Siberia and Mongolia, you'll find it in other areas of the world too, this very same condition, if you want to call it that, is oftentimes looked at as a gift. This hypersensitivity to environmental stimuli is looked at as a gift. It's looked at as something that should be worked with, not resolved or bandaged somehow. It's looked at as an opportunity, like you said. It's looked at as a promising sign of someone who's connected to energies that most people cannot see, and therefore could be a future shaman, could be a healer. So it's interesting how in our culture we don't look at these things as opportunities, whereas in other cultures they have, and they always have.
Yeah, I think that's part of what we in America are waking up. We're being called, and I think some of the diseases and disabilities and challenges that we're seeing are the bigger realms, or the shamanic realms, starting to say, okay, we gave you little signs, we gave you easier opportunities, and you still haven't all made some of the changes that need to be made. So we're going to start amping it up a bit. We turn up the volume for you.
Yeah.
I think I work with the unhoused population, and the thing that I notice the most is, there are in other places cultures that accept that the things that are different and illnesses and conditions as being an opportunity, but you can only turn that into an opportunity when you have a community that works together. And our community of that we're talking about, the American community, we do everything we can, and we in fact glorify people being separate. The lonesome cowboy out on the range, the hero, he's in the knight in shining armor, he's distant. All of our people, the White House, where we separate the president and the doctor that you do not question, the professor that you do not question, don't question, don't attach, and people we don't like, then we separate them even more, thus distancing them more from healing. You can turn it into an opportunity if you have people around you to offer the space for that to become an opportunity. Otherwise, it does become just a disability. It becomes just a detrimental condition. It becomes something that destroys you rather than builds you up. And the smaller the villages or this more involved, intricate, more traditional communities, they already have that there. They communicate with each other, and that's how you have that. It can be an opportunity. That's something we need to fix here. It's killing us to do it the other way.
The interconnectedness of all things. I mean, it sounds almost cliche to say it, because it's like, oh, we are all one. But I mean, when you get down into it, at least in my experience, when you get down into it in these cultures, when you're really peeling back the veils of what's been holding you back, these layers of illusion that you've kind of slowly accumulated. I mean, the one, or one of the core truths that you encounter is this interconnectedness of all things. And it's one of those other things where I hear it, I've heard it so many times, the shamans talk about it, and they try to ingrain it into me, but it's only when you actually get to the place where you can experience it yourself that it actually all makes sense. And you're like, oh yeah, oh okay, now that makes sense. Yes. Like the interconnectedness of all things. I mean, that's half the reason why these patients are in these dieta huts, is because they're not there. They're there out in the middle of nature, full immersion in nature, so that they slowly but surely realize that this is all just one living being. This is all one living system that we're a part of, and we're all interconnected. And the idea of separation is, it's part of the disease. It's part of this. It's part of this kind of malaise that we've been kind of operating under for the last, however many, 500 years or so. It feels like, that's something that really needs to be understood, and to kind of talk about how these, there are different levels of all this, but it feels like everything kind of operates. It's almost fractal, where, the rainforest has an energy, and to the extent that you can let the rainforest energy into you, it's going to flow through you, and you're going to be one with it, and you're going to be healed by it. But to the extent that you're trying to push it away and be separate from it, and to the extent that you're trying to push away your culture here in the United States, or in wherever you are in the world, to the extent that you're trying to be separate or better than or lesser than, as opposed to just one with or and a part of and a contributing and thriving, harmonious member of, you're going to ultimately, start finding stagnation in your life. There's patterns. There's that disconnect from life force flow is going to create this dissonance inside of you. I mean, it just feels like once you see it and you start looking at the world, when you come back into your regular culture, once you've been in these cultures that are completely interconnected and completely harmonious, and thriving together, and you come back to Connecticut, let's just say, and you see the way that people are really separate. People are sort of shutting each other out. People are shutting nature out. People are afraid of life, extremely fearful of death. You just see it. It's just become so obvious.
Yeah,
you come back.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, it just becomes so obvious. You see it, and you see the pathologies, that are going on. It's a beautiful thing to kind of witness, because there's this clear sight of it. You're like, oh wow, so you're doing this because that you're perceiving that, and then you're flinching against that, you're resisting that, pushing that away because of this other thing that seems clear, that is transpiring inside of you. Like, what if we all just let that go? Because I mean, ultimately, if I fast forward this behavior over and over and over again, like Groundhog Day for like 40 years, it's going to create disease. It's going to create sickness. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah. Isolation is how cancer cells work. So for our communities to try to isolate each other, we become more cancerous ourselves. It's not a big surprise there.
Yeah. I wanted to, before we wrap up, I know we're getting close here. One of the quotes that you have in the book on tribe is, here's the quote: "I believe that tribe is the prescription for the many pitfalls in the modern world. But to obtain this antidote, we must learn how to be in relationship with one another again, with our families, our neighbors, and spreading outward from there." End quote. I think that really sums up what we can do. I mean, how we can start to make change, and it's so very simple. You step outside and just say hello to your neighbors. Drop off some eggs from your chickens.
Yeah.
Wow.
There's so much energy being transmitted there.
Yeah.
And I think that in that same chapter I talk about this thing that we do. It's kind of, I guess, we look at it as sort of this privilege that we have living in the new world, where we get to, ship our grandparents down to Florida to live down there, and then, have these self-important jobs that keep us away from our kids, so they get to come home and not have anyone there and sort of entertain themselves. So pretty much everyone in our families are separate. Every level of our family is separate. And you go down to these areas of Central and South America, which is where I love to hang out. In fact, honestly, like, it's where I would want to live. We probably ultimately will live there again. Yeah. But it's my favorite place to go, because just walking down the streets of these villages, these little towns, like, everyone is living either under the same roof or literally in houses that are right next to each other, that are small, that are probably, slightly offensively small to our gigantic supersize me American sensibilities. But you see these families that are just so intertwined. Like, there's like 4 generations that are living within a half a mile of each other. Yeah. And there's something there that you see and you feel, and you're like, oh my gosh, like, this little child who's 4 or 5 years old gets to know his grandmother and his great-great-grandmother. You know what I mean? He gets to have that. And all the
aunties and all the uncles and all the cousins. Yeah.
And there's a richness there. There's a wealth that they have that we are completely missing out on. We are completely bankrupt with that. I mean, there are pockets. There are people that who have really close-knit families here in the States, but that is not the rule. That is not how we are living. We're living, and again, I think that there's this illusion that we are privileged and that this is what you get to do when you have a lot of money, or you've evolved, or there's something there that we have this belief that that we've arrived somehow.
Yeah.
When you go down to these other countries, and also in Europe, it's very similar. Like, you'll find a lot of small towns that have the same thing, where there's a lot of relatives living very close to each other. I think that there is something there. There are epigenetic factors here that we're not taking into consideration, that science has not even begun to try to wrap its head around.
Right.
That completely involved in our spiritual and physical health. Yeah. Anyway,
somehow loneliness became an ideal. That's a marketing scheme. Right. Oh my gosh. Well, thank you very much, Nick, for being with us on our podcast today. And how is it that people can get a hold of you?
Our website is thesacredscience.com, and we have all kinds of awesome articles and videos. My book is prominently featured on the homepage, so you'll see it if you want to take an adventure with me. It's something that I poured every bit of myself into. As you guys probably can attest, it's very honest. I don't, to the extent that I know what this path is about and what this universe might hold for myself and you. I've written it down on those pages in as honest and straightforward and healing a fashion as I know to write it in. And that would be something I would highly recommend if you're looking into the shamanic path and potentially going down to South America or working with any plant medicines that could be used for spiritual evolution. That's what this book is all about. And you can find it on that website.
What about your cookbook?
We have a sacred cookbook, which came out 4 or 5 years ago. That is probably the best-selling thing we have on our website. It's ancient recipes from around the world. We use 3 bits of criteria to qualify which recipes we're going to be included. The 3 bits of criteria are: they need to be over 500 years old, they need to have proven medicinal value, and they need to taste delicious.
Well,
Nice.
Very nice. Well,
And you
okay.
can get those there. You can get those on the same website. So yeah, come visit us, thesacredscience.com.
Very cool. Well, thank you very much for being with us. And I hope that we can have you with us again to hear more about your wonderful journey. And until then, put an herb on it.
The statements made about herbs and products on this podcast have not been evaluated by the United States Food and Drug Administration, FDA, and are not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent disease. All information provided on this podcast or any affiliated websites is for informational purposes only and is not intended as a substitute for advice from your physician or other healthcare professional. You should not use the information on this podcast and its affiliated websites for a diagnosis or treatment of any health problem. Always consult with a healthcare professional before starting any new vitamins, supplements, diet, or exercise program before taking any medication, or if you have or suspect you might have a health problem. Any testimonials, questions, or case studies are based on individual results and do not constitute a guarantee that you will achieve the same results.